He's back. The torpedo returned in 2019, and actually, that's a fact that I forgot. Very, very quickly this year, Danil Kvyat came back to Formula 1 after a year out. Again, I did forget this when I was doing my research for this video. I thought to myself, well, how did he compare to last year? And I thought, what are you on about, you silly Billy? He wasn't in Formula 1 last year, and yet the way he's come back, the way he's bounced back to Formula 1 this year, I think has been very, very impressive. The way Toro Rosso treated him, well, not necessarily Toro Rosso, but the Red Bull family, the way they picked him up, put him into that Red Bull seat, and then took it away from him after that Russian Grand Prix, after contact with Sebastian Vettel in 2016, then ultimately lost his drive completely from Formula 1 in 2017. The way he's not only bounced back, but matured in his driving, and I think has been the team leader for Toro Rosso in 2019, I think has been very, very respectable. And actually, I think he's done his whole career and his whole CV in motorsport a whole lot of good by returning to Formula 1. And definitely when there was the announcement he was coming back, I was a little bit sceptical. His performances at the end of 2017 weren't brilliant, but this was a driver who over the entirety of 2015 did beat Daniil Ricciardo in the standings at Red Bull Racing, his only full season at Red Bull, which is no mean feat. And look at the drivers, Gasly and maybe not so much Albon, but Gasly in particular, how he struggled so much in the early stages of this season, moving up to Red Bull. I think a lot of people have got a lot more respect for Danny over the course of 2019, and I think the season as a whole hasn't been too bad, but he's definitely one of those drivers that personally I feel did a lot better in the first half of the season than in the second half of the season. Of course, there was the entire Red Bull transfer kerfuffle with Gasly and Albon swapping seats, but many people felt Danny deserved that chance, and maybe that had a slight effect mentally on the rest of his season. I don't know. Let's look at some statistics, and then we'll try and unravel that a little bit more in a moment. So, head-to-head battle. I like looking at these, but for Toro Rosso and for Red Bull, it's not really a lot of good because of that driver swap midway through the season. But Kvyat, Gasly, this is how their statistics match up. It's 2-7 in the quali battle, in Gasly's favour actually. Gasly in the second half of the year, I think was the stronger of the two Toro Rosso drivers, but race battle, it's a little bit closer. 4-5 in favour of Gasly. Championship position and points don't really mean a fat lot, considering that Gasly spent half of the year at Red Bull. Kvyat's personal statistics, these are a little bit more juicy, a little bit more interesting, personally I feel anyway. No wins, no poles, no surprise, but one podium definitely is a surprise. Of course, in that incredible race in Germany, Kvyat smashed it, had a brilliant Grand Prix along with teammate Alex Albon, but it was Danny who picked up his third career Formula 1 podium. 13th in the championship, a quali best result of P6 in Azerbaijan, and of course race best result of P3 in Germany. I want to start with the first half of the year because it was super, super good. Of course, as I've already broke down a fair bit, I didn't really expect a lot from his return to Formula 1. I thought perhaps he'd be a little bit shaky, perhaps the pressure might get to him, but I was so wrong, and I'm so happy I am so wrong straight away. And if you haven't been following Formula 1 on YouTube over the past few weeks, they've been putting out some brilliant bits and bobs. I think they're really upping their game this year on the social media side, the YouTube boys and girls on Formula 1. That's not what we're talking about today, but I think it's really highlighted, and maybe this is because Alex Afro's working for them these days, sorry Alex, but they've really, at the overtakes of the year, Kvyat was in there several times. Lots of the highlight reels has involved moments with Danny Kvyat from that first half of the season. That overtake on Kimi Räikkönen, for me, should have been right up there as one of the best of the year in Spain, around the outside of, which one is it, 1, 2, 3, turn 4. I was doing a mental map in my head there, but around the outside of turn 4, that's ridiculous. I've never seen anyone do that, and to do it in a Toro Rosso against an Alfa Romeo, and of course, yeah, I'm sure Kvyat was on better tyres, whatever you want to say. It was still a ridiculous move, ridiculously good. And for that to be happening so early on in the season, I think was a real sign of things to come. Of course, we had races like Germany where he was probably one of the only drivers that didn't make a single mistake. Even Max Verstappen, who went on to win that race, had a little spin early on in the Grand Prix. But Danny was almost faultless, and of course that Grand Prix was all about timing and strategy and taking a gamble. But also, I think, to be fair, I didn't really highlight this, I feel, anyway, in my Lance Stroll video. I think both Stroll and Kvyat and Sebastian Vettel, we'll talk about him in a few days' time, all just made no mistakes. And that's what I think really helped them, especially Danny in 2019, a driver who has this reputation of being a torpedo. We didn't see a fat lot of that. A little bit later on in the year, we saw it a little bit more. There was that incident with Kimi Raikkonen in Singapore. I feel that was potentially more Raikkonen's fault, but it's a bit of a 50-50 one, that one. We saw a couple more incidents as well, but nothing too major like we'd seen. We'd seen at the end of the season as well, it was an incident in the USA and in Mexico on the very last lap, was trying to make an overtake, but it didn't quite work and got a few penalties and got a little bit scruffy at the end of the year. I think that's how I view it. But as a whole, super, super good. And when you look at the championship, finished down in P13, that midfield was super, super close. But you also look at Kvyat and his season as a whole, there were moments where you do feel it got a little bit unlucky. And of course, all drivers have their fair share of luck. But Monza, he was having a brilliant Grand Prix, engine failure. Things like that didn't quite go his way this year, but on a whole, I've been super impressed with his return in 2019. He's been that team leader, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do against Gasly for an entire season long next year. And I definitely think it wouldn't surprise me if we saw him do a little switch to a team further up the grid in the next few years. I'm going to give Daniil Kvyat a 7 out of 10. That second half wasn't quite as good as the first half. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe if you enjoyed and you're new, and I hope to see you in the next one.